Hi, I'm Warren. Welcome back to this intermediate Power BI course. I think before we get into creating our visuals, I want to take you through the difference between a calculated column and a DAX formula. If we have a look here on our final report, we have a visual here that has grouped our total sales into age buckets. So anyone who's aged between 30 and 40, 20 and 30 and 40 years old is in here. If we look at our customer age from our customer table, that's the individual age. So for instance, if we click on 44, that has now filtered this visual into the 40-year-old bucket, but it isn't including 45, 46, 47, all the other years in that bucket. So it would make more sense to have this drop down showing the buckets like we have over here. So we can use something called a calculated column to do that. So let's go into our Power BI model. If we have a look here, if we wanted to create a new slicer, you can't use a measure in a slicer. A measure is a result, it's a formula, it's a result of a calculation. So if you want to apply some form of logic in a calculation that you want to be able to slice and dice your data by, you need to create a calculated column. Now, both measures and calculated columns are created with DAX. So I'll show you now what I mean. If we go to our data view and we go to our customer table, here we have all of our customer records with the age. You have the ability here to create a new column. So if we create a new column, we can write a DAX formula here that will actually be put into this column. Now, the difference between a DAX formula and a calculated column is that a DAX formula is virtual. You're only using memory and data size when you're viewing that result of that DAX formula from a measure. If you put a calculated column in here, it is actually counts as data in this table. So it will make this table bigger because we'll have actual data being inserted in the table. So if you can use a measure, rather use a measure. But if you need a calculation that you want to slice and dice your data by, you can't use a measure in a slicer, but you can use a calculated column in a slicer. So that would be when you want to use a calculated column over a measure. So let me show you here. We can call this age bucket. And you can use an if statement. So you can do if. You can have a nested if statement. And if you're familiar with Excel, you can have an if statement within an if statement. So we could say if age, customer age, is greater than 30, then old, else young. In that case, I must be very old. So you could do something like that. You could do an if statement, or you could have another if statement to return if false, and you could have another if statement, another if statement. But here you can see it's gone and it's put in old and young. This is a DAX formula. So if we copy this and we go back here and we create a measure, and I'll call this measure yeah, a single value for column age would not be returned. So in this case, you would need to use calculate, which we're not going to get into this. That's a bit out of scope for this course. So that's why we're going to do this in a calculated column, because here we would need to use calculate to iterate through the entire table and apply this expression to every row of our DAX formula. It does that automatically when you create a calculated column. So we get an error when we try and do a measure. That's why we're going to do a calculated column. It can be done in a measure, but I think that's going to be a little bit too involved in this course. We will touch on that in the DAX course. So let's go back to our table. We want to be a little bit more advanced. We don't just want old and young, but just to show you that it works, we can create a slicer visual, and we can now go to our customer table, and we can grab age bucket and we can drop it here, and we can actually filter by the result of that DAX. If we took that out and we try to put a DAX measure in, it won't allow us to. So if you want to slice and dice, you have to have a calculated column. So let's go back to our calculated column. We want to have something a little bit more involved in this, and you can use nested if statements, put another if statement there, but if we have too many categories, it's actually better to use a switch statement. So I'm going to show you what a switch statement is now. I'm just going to move that down. If you control and /, you can comment out DAX code. So I'm going to type in switch, tab, and we want to use true. So what this does, switch true allows you to have multiple statements, and it will return whichever one comes back as true for that scenario. So now if we went switch true, let me hold on shift to get one down there, and we said customer age is greater than 30, what do we want it to do? The result of that would be old. Another comma. Now we can do the next value. I'm going to hold down shift and push enter to go to the next line. If customer age is greater than 40, very old. Okay. And then you can do a final statement there. Let's just leave it at that for now. And now you can see if it doesn't return anything, you can have an else statement if you want. But yeah, you can see old. And if we get anyone above, let's do this. Let's do less than 30 young. Sorry, I'm a little over the place. So I'll show you the final one now. I want to do the same as my if statement. Young. There we go. So there we have old and young. So that's exactly what we did in the if statement, but we're using switch true. We want to have multiple buckets. So instead of boring you with typing out the entire statement, I'm going to paste it in here and I'm going to talk you through it. So again, we have switch true. Hold down shift and enter. Just tab it across. I'm going to take all of these down just so we can see each one. Whenever it goes through each record, whenever one of these becomes true, it's going to return this here. So we're saying if the customer age is older than 0 but younger than 20, the bucket will be under 20 years old. If it's greater than 20 and less than or equal to 30, it will be between 20 and 30 years old. If it's greater than 30, less than or equal to 40, it's between 30 and 40. Otherwise, any other record would be over 40 years old. So anything older than 40 would be over 40. So that's where we have our conditions, and then we have our else, like you have an if then else statement. Push enter, and there we have our different buckets. Over 40, that guy's 45. Here we have between 20 and 30, between 30 and 40, etc. So although we can have a DAX measure doing this, because we want to slice and dice by it, we have to do it as a calculated column. So now instead of having age, it would make more sense, I'm just going to side by side, to use our new age bucket. And here if we say over 40, it filtered all of our KPI cards to all the KPIs for customers that are over 40. And if you look in the age drop down, it's only showing the ages between 40 and 49. If we go between 20 and 30, is between 20 and 30. So we no longer need that age. We can now use the age bucket. That makes more sense. So there we have an age bucket drop down. We'll just clear that. So I thought that would be a bit better than having the individual ages. And you can use this for any kind of segmenting approach. You might have, customers that have spent more than a certain amount become a certain category of customer. You can use the same switch true statement to create buckets for any dimension or measure. So I thought that would be a bit of a better way of looking at it than how I had it in the actual final product over here, because to look by individual age doesn't actually add any value. So that's it for this video. We've looked at the age bucket that we're going to use down here, but we're going to add it to a drop down too, because it just makes a bit more sense. And in the next video, we're going to go through creating the actual visuals here. So great, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.